We tend to take the legacy of the British Empire and Protestant England as historical guarantees, but in a single summer, that entire future was almost erased before it even began. In 1588, King Philip II of Spain launched 130 ships across the ocean. His target was Queen Elizabeth I, and his goal was to remove her from the throne entirely. Philip had three distinct motives for the invasion. He wanted to depose the sitting monarch, cut off English funding for Protestant rebels fighting his forces in the Spanish Netherlands, and force England back under the strict authority of the Catholic Church. This map illustrates the sheer scale of the threat. The shaded regions across the Americas and Africa show a Spanish empire flush with colonial wealth and dominating the global stage. Against this superpower, England's home defenses were severely underfunded and disorganized. The military mismatch was so extreme that if the Spanish forces managed to set foot on the beach, the island nation lacked the organized manpower to stop them from taking the country. Philip's invasion relied on a highly complex maneuver. His massive naval fleet had to sail up the coast and execute a precise rendezvous with a ground army, led by the Duke of Parma, waiting in Flanders. This diagram of the English Channel highlights the fatal flaw in the strategy. To get Parma's thousands of soldiers to England, the Armada opted to cut their anchors and scatter, permanently breaking the tight formation required to protect those vulnerable barges. Stripped of their formation and unable to link up with Blarney, the Armada was forced into a brutal retreat around the harsh coasts of Scotland and Ireland. Fierce storms battered the surviving ships, a catastrophic weather event that the victorious English quickly labeled God's Wind. England survived the massive invasion force largely because a fragile logistical handoff collapsed, compounded by a catastrophic stroke of bad weather, rather than through sheer military dominance. But we have to look at how thin that margin of survival actually was. If the Spanish commanders had maintained discipline during the fireship attack and successfully linked up with the barges, the outcome shifts entirely. Looking at this historical map of the English Channel and the Cornwall coast, we can see the vulnerable entry points. Without the disruption of the fireships, tens of thousands of experienced Spanish veterans would have crossed this short distance and landed on these shores. Once on land, a highly disciplined professional Spanish army would have faced a patchwork of uncoordinated local militias. They would have encountered very little organized resistance as they marched straight for the capital. This vintage map displays the dense urban layout of 16th century London along the River Thames. A Spanish siege here would have cornered Elizabeth's government. Capturing the city would collapse the state, allowing Philip to install a Catholic monarch, likely his own daughter, on the English throne. Taking the capital meant erasing the independent English state entirely, turning the nation into a controlled territory of the Spanish crown. The immediate domestic consequence of a Spanish victory would be a swift, aggressive dismantling of the Protestant Reformation. Decades of Elizabeth's religious policies would be instantly erased. This shift would plunge the country into a wave of violent religious persecution. England had experienced severe crackdowns before, during the bloody reign of Mary I, but this iteration would carry a distinct and terrifying difference. The tribunals would not be directed by a native English monarch. Instead, enforcement would be carried out by a hostile foreign military occupying the streets. English citizens would face severe cultural suffocation. Every aspect of daily life, from local governance to public worship, would be tightly managed by the absolute authority of a distant Catholic superstate. The nation would be permanently reduced to a vassal state, stripped of its independent cultural identity to serve the interests of the Spanish Empire. With England's naval forces permanently crushed, Spain removes its only significant rival, allowing its maritime dominance to expand unchecked. Centuries of English naval development are entirely erased. Without those ships, English colonization of North America and the British Empire's global economic networks never happen. Spain's absolute grip on global trade and colonial wealth would remain unchallenged, cementing an imbalance of power in Europe that would dictate the continent's politics for the next 200 years. The geopolitical map of the modern world, including the widespread influence of the English language and British legal systems, is not an inevitability. It exists today almost entirely because of a few burning ships and a well-timed shift in the wind.